Many girls in medieval Europe chose for themselves the fate of a nun. There were several reasons for this. Some could not or did not want to marry. And without the bonds of marriage, girls could not inherit their parents' property and provide for their lives. Some thought that life in a monastery was much safer than the secular life where there were constant wars. Others lost their families to epidemics, were left alone, and went to monasteries in search of shelter and food. Once in a monastery, girls had to give their lives to the service of God and forget worldly anxieties and joys. They were called brides of Christ, which meant that any relationship with men was forbidden. It was not easy for the young nuns to cope with the desires that overwhelmed them. And to combat temptation, the monasteries develop a whole system of action. A long, busy day, beginning at dawn. Hours of daily prayers praising God, the hardest physical labor, after which the legs shook and there was only one desire, to sleep, closed, heavy clothing, leaving open only the hands and face, also protected from sweet thoughts in the literal and figurative sense. In the most severe cases, when nuns could not cope with the call of nature, they doused themselves with icy water in the cold, injured themselves, or put weights on their hands and feet. But not all nuns kept their vow of fidelity to God, and not every convent forgot about earthly desires. Even church dignitaries agreed that if a nun broke her vow, she should deserve leniency, since all men are sinners. In the 12th century, at the height of the prohibitions on the manifestation of feelings and desires, especially on the part of women, in the English monastery of Littlemore, Oxfordshire County, with enviable consistency, or rather to say, for 2 centuries, things happened, absolutely unacceptable from the point of view of morality and morality of the time. The nuns, headed by the abbess, did not observe religious fasts, but this was the mildest violation of the church commandments. Men from neighboring villages came to them, wine flowed in rivers, fun was unrestrained. When men from the village became scarce, enterprising girls began to invite travelers to the monastery. They took a lot of money for their services and often robbed their guests. The abbess encouraged all the deeds of her wards related to men. At the same time, she treated the girls very cruelly. She beat them, starved them, shackled them, and locked them in cells. She herself was not a paragon of virtue, not shy, openly lived with the priest, who also apparently not afraid of God's punishment. Their relationship was marked by the birth of the fruit of love, which then nursed the whole monastery. The birth of a child was no reason for the abbess to moderate her merry life. The nuns did not consider their behavior sinful. They justified their actions and said that everyone makes mistakes in this life. Similar situations developed in the Middle Ages in many monasteries throughout Europe. Behind the thick monastic walls, things happened that many wards of secular houses of entertainment did not dare to do. It wasn't just rich men who visited the abbeys. Church officials themselves were not averse to fulfilling their desires with attractive nuns. The birth of children on the territory of the monastery ceased to be something surprising and forbidden. Monastic amusements attracted men because the girls behaved freely and freely. The life of nuns was hidden from the eyes of society, and they were not afraid of condemnation. Secular ladies were perhaps more ascetic than nuns. They could not overtly show or manifest their desires in any way. In their relations with their husbands, they were obliged to observe restraint and imperturbability. The slightest impulses could lead to her husband considering her a promiscuous woman and divorcing her. The church authorities tried to combat the inappropriate behavior in the monasteries by various methods. Church officials who were found to have sinned were deprived of their ministry. The Mother Superior of Littlemore was walled up to torment the nuns. Girls were locked in cold, narrow cells, forced to pray for their sins, and had guards to keep them from escaping. But the harshest punishments did not have the desired effect. Terror before the punishment of the forces of heaven did not stop girls in the manifestation of desires. In the Middle Ages, religion was the main instrument of influence on society. People believed in hell and heaven, in life after death. The church came up with numerous taboos to keep people in its power. The prohibition of women's desires was especially significant, but it turned out that the mass violation of this prohibition took place precisely in religious communities called to serve God. Even those nuns who did not want to allow sinfulness were forced to do so, because they were in the same society, on the same territory, fenced by strong monastic walls with those who led a free life and indulged in pleasure. It was impossible to oppose the excesses and liberties that reigned there. Only escape could free a pure girl from the encroachments of men. But many had nowhere to go and nothing to live on. Some nuns became kept by incoming men and left the convent. Scandalous revelations of nuns. In Rome, the convent of Sant'Ambrogio della Massima in Rome conducted macabre rituals. The definition of macabre is usually synonymous with scary, horrible, frightening, related to intimate practices. In 1850, the founder of the convent of Sant'Ambrogio was stripped of her title of abbess for encouraging other nuns to worship her as a false idol. The superior of the novices, Maria Luisa, took to arranging nightly trysts with her novices. These actions continued even after the founder of the convent, Maria Agnes Ferrario, was dismissed and other nuns took her place. Maria Luisa introduced some unorthodox practices for the new nuns, including intimate initiation rites. Maria Luisa told the nuns that her body fluids contained divine blessings that could be shared during intimacy. During the trial, Maria Luisa admitted that the holy founder of the Fero order used similar methods to pass her miracle drink to Maria Luisa and former novices. The novices were invited to spend the night in Maria's cell. If any of the nuns complained about the rituals, they would mysteriously fall ill and die. Princess Katharina escaped from the convent and exposed Mary. For decades, the Catholic Church covered up the scandal at Sant'Ambrogio. The records of the Inquisition were hidden in a secret archive that was not open to the public. That all changed, however, when scholars gained access to the materials, and one in particular revealed Maria Luisa's scandalous behavior. Hubert Wolff, a professor of history at the University of Munster, discovered the records at Sant'Ambrogio, hidden deep in the Vatican archives. Wolff was one of the first scholars to gain access to the once secret archives of the Inquisition. In The Nuns of Sant'Ambrogio, The True Story of a Convent in Scandal, published in 2015, Wolff tells the story of Maria Luisa, Ferrario, and their illicit behavior.